Today, I want to talk about two Frank Miller Batman comics. One about Batman's beginning and one about his end. What makes these comic books so special? And what are their problems? Let's go and find out. Batman was created in 1938 by DC Comics, the same publisher that also published Superman. But while Superman tells a basically optimistic story about a super-powered alien who has decided to use his powers for good, the Batman tells a darker story. Batman tells of Bruce Wayne, who loses his parents in a mugging, after which he vows to dedicate his life to a personal war for justice. The initial Batman stories were violent, dark and grim, and showed a Batman who would use lethal violence and even firearms. But when Batman appealed to youngsters, the violence and grimness was soon toned down in favor of vanilla, kid-friendly stories. And it was this kid-friendly vanilla Batman that Frank Miller took issue with when he started to write Batman stories in 1986. In 1986, Frank Miller was invited to write two Batman stories. The first one is Batman Year One. This is a hard-boiled detective story, a real slow burner. Year One focuses on two characters. Bruce Wayne, who returns to Gotham to make his first outings as Batman, and Detective Jim Gordon, who comes to Gotham to clean up a failing and corrupt police department. The setting is small. There are no superpowered heroes or villains, and the focus lies on two protagonists who are determined but also vulnerable, making their first steps into Gotham City. What makes this comic book so special is the tension building. On the one hand, you have a hard-boiled story, but on the other hand, you have controlled art and cool colors, and this creates an opposition that causes tension. How different is The Dark Knight Returns? Here, Frank Miller tells of the last quest of Batman. Now old and retired, Batman decides to take a last stand and finally rid Gotham of evil and crime once and for all. Also, Batman is not well, mentally. At various points, Frank Miller raises the question, can a man who wears a spandex suit and fights supervillains really be sane? Can such a person be a hero? The use of excessive violence by Batman pushes the envelope even further. And while the artwork in Year One is cool and controlled, Frank Miller's own artwork in The Dark Knight Returns is furious, expressive and bold. Together, Year One and The Dark Knight Returns show the breadth and scope of Frank Miller's artistry. From writer to artist, from co-creator to soloist, from hyper-controlled to super expressive, these two comic books made 1986 a turning point in Batman history. Frank Miller's Batman comics were a critical and commercial success, and they breathed new life into an old character. To be fair, Batman was doing pretty well before Frank Miller stepped in, but his two comic book stories sparked new fan interest and new creative energies. Over time, however, I feel that the dark, grim, brooding Batman character that Frank Miller helped to re-establish has become a bit of a stereotype. And what does not help is that Frank Miller's later returns to the Batman character do not hold up to the original. In the year 2000, Wizard magazine published an overview of the most overused comic book tropes. On the 5th place, Batman broods. I believe that it is time to move on and give space for different takes on the Batman. And I think that Tom King has really paved the way for such a different take, even though he was cut short by Batman's publisher DC Comics. Recently, Tom King was hired for a 100-issue run on Batman. And although he started with a soft reboot approach, he soon embarked on an extensive saga with the goal of radically overhauling the Batman character and his universe. Centered around Batman's marriage proposal to Catwoman, Tom King's saga radically breaks with age-old patterns between Batman and the Bat family, so Batman and Alfred, Batman and the Robins, between Batman and his foes, the Joker, Bane, and between Batman and Catwoman. Rather than remaining within the confines of an emotionally stunted, closed-off Batman character, Tom King envisions a path for Batman to become more open, more vulnerable, and more in touch with his feelings and with his friends and family. In a sense, this path was similar to the path that was envisioned for Daniel Craig's James Bond character, who would also become more open, more vulnerable, and more whole than older incarnations of this character. In Tom King's Batman, there is space for wonder when he introduces the Psycho Pirate. There is space for humor when he introduces the Condiment King. But especially there is space for caring and healing. The ultimate goal here, I think, was to create a Batman who could be happy, who could have real relationships with his friends and family, and who could embrace the fun of being a superhero with tons and tons of gadgets. Unfortunately, it was not to be. And Tom King's controversial run on Batman was cut short midway by DC publishers, who then resolutely returned to the dark, grim, brooding Batman character of old. That does not mean that the current Batman stories are bad. In fact, Batman is going through a new golden age. But I do think that there's a road not taken here, the chance at a healthy and happy Batman. That type of Batman has precursors in the 1950s comics, in the 1966 TV series, and in the terrible, terrible film Batman and Robin. But Tom King does something different. He hints at a Batman who could be happy and engaging. Luckily, Tom King and Batman are still around. And while we continue to enjoy stories of a dark and brooding Batman, we wait for a creator who will once again push the envelope on this classic character. Thank you for watching this video. If you liked this video, don't forget to like, subscribe and ring the bell. And especially ringing the bell is important, because with all these bells I will exchange them for photon torpedoes, which I will then use to conquer the entire galaxy.